Snowboarding is very fun. Unfortunately, it's also very expensive. The cost of entry for this sport is so steep that I've never been able to even really consider getting seriously into it. But my whole life, I've been trying to kind of beat the system with, varying levels of success. And this year, I decided to try it with snowboarding. So today, I'm going to tell you the story of how I was able to get all the gear I needed to go snowboarding this winter for less than $200. With all that out of the way, my name is Trace. Thanks for clicking on this video. Let's get into it. My very first step in this process was pretty obvious. Get a snowboard. If you're at all familiar with snowboarding prices, you know just how ridiculous it can seem for a broke college kid from an average income family to buy anything brand new. Even the lowest end Amazon snowboards that I could find are still a couple $100s. And if you want to buy anything even half decent, you're looking to spend, at the very minimum, several $100s on the board alone. So instead of going down that route, I turned to every broke college kid's best friend, Facebook Marketplace. My goal here was to find a board that was at least close to the right size for me, had some sort of bindings included, and was cheap. Luckily for me, I was able to find something that met all those criteria for a solid $50. The next step was to test the board on a local hill that my family goes to every year to go sledding. But when I took it there and set it down, immediately the bindings just snapped off. They were so old and they had seen so much weather that just me literally setting the board down, not throwing it or anything, the binding strap just snapped. That was definitely a pretty major setback for me. I just dropped $50 on this thing, planning to use the bindings, and I find out that they're complete trash. I hurried up, looked online for some replacement parts, but everything that I could find was another like $40 for the strap alone, and it would take like 3 weeks to get here, and I had to go snowboarding with my cousin like that weekend, so I didn't have the time for any of that. At that point, it would have made the most sense for me to just bite the bullet and buy a, cheap pair of bindings off of eBay or Amazon and just hoped that they would have gotten here in time. But I figured that kind of defeated the whole purpose. Like, I wanted to jerry-rig stuff and figure it out on my own and get something that was cheap and not spend that sort of money on it. So I decided to do something different. Fortunately, just a few weeks earlier, I got one of my favorite Christmas presents of all time, a brand new 3D printer. So I turned to the internet to see if 3D printing snowboard bindings was something that even really could be done. As it turns out, I found this YouTube video and a couple other random posts online that suggested it was something that people actually had done with reasonably cheap materials with, pretty promising levels of success. While I could have just pulled the files from online and just printed them out, there were a few problems with that. For one, the buckles that I had for my snowboard wouldn't have matched the buckles that went into the 3D printed bindings. So that would have been a pretty big issue. Also, fortunately for me again, I'm an engineering student and I actually know how to use 3D modeling software. So, using that video as a reference and the files that he had on there to kind of make sure I was in the right ballpark, I just went and designed my own. Deja vu, I've just been in this place before. Higher on the street and I know it's my time to go. And I'll have a link to those files in the description if you have a 3D printer and you have some TPU and you want to try it out. They'll be right on down there, I guess. After spending a couple hours in CAD, I finally had some designs that I was pretty happy with and went ahead and got them printed. The TPU filament that I used was a pretty cheap one off of Amazon, and I got it for only $14. In total, the estimated cost for the binding straps alone was about 4 hours of designing, 8 hours of print time, and around $2 in raw materials. At this point, I was in $50 for the snowboard, about $15 for the filament, $6 for the replacement ladder straps, and I had to drop another $20 on a cheap helmet off of Amazon. Currently sitting at a grand total of $91. I also dropped like $5 on spray paint just to get the bindings matte black instead of the navy and white, which didn't look too great on the black and red snowboard, in my opinion. Once that was done and the bindings were assembled, all that was left was to meet my cousin up at Round Top, try them out for the first time. Admittedly, at this point in the story, I was still missing one pretty major piece of equipment, the snowboard boots. While this was making me a little bit nervous for renting I called around, talked to some of the people with the Vail Resorts at Round Top, and they told me that it would be totally fine if all I wanted to do was just rent the boots and not rent a board because I already had my own. They said that was fine. Unfortunately for me, they were in fact wrong. When I got up to the rental stand to try to get my boots, they said that this was the first season they implemented a rule where you have to get the package and you can't just get the boots alone. At this point, I was feeling pretty discouraged because it felt like all of the hours of work that I'd put into it and the money that I spent on a board was pretty much thrown down the drain because I needed to rent a whole setup anyway. Things did start looking up a little bit when my cousin reminded me that it would actually be pretty nice of an opportunity, because then I had a real brand new Burton board with brand new bindings that I could compare to my own setup the same day on the same slopes. And I was like, you know what? It's a fair point. So there was at least some positive that came out of it. I started out on the rental board just because I figured it would be a little bit safer. The rental board was pretty nice. It was pretty stable. The bindings were actually like a little bit loose though, so that felt a little bit weird. But all in all, it was pretty enjoyable. It was a pretty nice board, and it was just really easy. I did probably like 5 to 10 runs down on the rental board before I decided it was time to give my very own invention a fair shot. So I got my board, went to the beginner slope, got locked in, took the lift, did my first run down, and it was actually really good. Now I understand that this is something that I put hours into that I'm going to be completely biased towards, but I will say I definitely preferred my board to the rental board. I know, crazy, I know, but it's true, I did prefer it. I genuinely think a big part of it was the bindings, because the bindings, like I said, on the rental board were kind of loosey-goosey and they would like shift back and forth like 3 or 4 degrees, which just was not fun. And they were also like way too firm and kind of just didn't feel like a good interface with the board. My bindings, on the other hand, are perfect. Let me tell you, there was just the right amount of flex. It felt so good on my feet. It felt like I was one with the board. Amazing, amazing. Oh, and it was also faster than the Burton board, which was pretty funny to me because I can't imagine that thing has seen anything resembling wax in like 20 years. So not too bad. So I got back down to the bottom of the slope to get in line to run it one more time just to double check before I went to the other slopes. And disaster yet again struck. While I was taking out my right boot to skate over to the lift line, I pulled my foot out, lost my balance a little bit, got caught, had to put my foot down to catch myself, and I stepped right on the binding strap. It was completely broken and I was very sad. But by God's grace, I had the foresight to design a bunch of other holes in the strap. So I was able to take it down to the pro shop there at the mountain, and they were able to slip it into one of the other holes, and I was back on track. And let me tell you, it worked the rest of the day without a hitch. I was much more careful about not stepping on it, and if I stepped on it again, it would probably break again. With that out of the way, the rest of the day was awesome. It felt really good. It was definitely a lot more squirrely on the higher speeds, on the steeper hills. Felt like I was gonna catch an edge way harder, but it was also a little bit more nimble, a little bit more fun to ride in my opinion, and you were a little bit more on that edge. Since then, I was able to hop back on Facebook Marketplace, pick up a pretty decent pair of snowboard boots for about 60 bucks, landing us at a grand total of, I think, 157 maybe dollars. I'll take it. Definitely under 200, mission accomplished, get in. So, what I personally recommend going through all that time and heartache to save 100 bucks on your snowboarding setup.
For legal reasons, definitely not.
For me, yes, absolutely. In my opinion, the best part about this whole process wasn't necessarily even riding the snowboard, although that was super fun, but it was seeing the culmination of many hours come together into something that was actually useful to me. And that's fun. This is also pretty corny, but it's true that the origins of snowboarding were very DIY, rebellious guys that just wanted to do their own thing. And I felt like, in a way, I got back to that a little bit, where I was just doing my own thing, jerry-rigging it, making it so it would work, and making it so I was able to afford having a good time on the slopes. And even if you don't download my files or, make a snowboard or anything, I also want to encourage you to just get out there and make something. I believe that we're designed in the image of God, and God is a creator. So I think we're designed to create. So with all that being said, on all that corny stuff out of the way, thank you so much for watching. And yeah, get out there and do something. Peace out. Am I even recording? That would have been funny. Geo Wizard moment. If you know, you know.